everyone. I've just finished reading chapter 24 of Darth Plagueis. Actually, 5 minutes after the last video came out on Plagueis. It's literally just finished uploading. So, this is my review. Again, I've got to say about almost all the chapters in the book. Well, all the chapters in the book are good, it's just some are made more complicated than others. We start this off with Palpatine with Varuna, and to cut a bit of a complex conversation short, basically they're trying to get Naboo is trying to rise up against the Trade Federation to push them back, and I assume now they're in a position to transport their plasma themselves, and also because King Varuna, the next election his term is coming to an end and he wants to be elected, and by supporting the Trade Federation it's a guarantee he won't be elected. But it's made clear that the Republic is going to vote in favour of the Republic is going to end up voting in favour for the taxation of free trade routes, because of course you've got the more remote worlds, which are for the most part dominated by the Trade Federation, and while the Trade Federation are going to be making losses by having to pay the tax, they can just charge the shipping, they can just increase the costs of the shipping to compensate, and of course get the worlds to pay more and such. So the Trade Federation is of course going to fight back against Naboo if they try to route them, which is what they're intending to do. And it means that, it means it's going to end up being a futile attempt by Varuna to stay king. And Palpatine suggests to vote against the taxation, which would seem to be in favour, which would make him seem in favour of the Trade Federation. But I'm just going to read through my summary. Varuna is intending to chase the Trade Federation away from Naboo so that it may support itself, and Varuna is re-elected as king. However, Palpatine says the Republic may allow the Trade Federation to arm its ships. When Varuna asks why, Palpatine explains it's because of Yinkor's rebellion and pirate attacks due to the Republic not making a military. Palpatine says Valorum wishes to make a deal with the Federation, give them weapons in exchange for the taxation of free of charge trade routes. Palpatine says they must vote against the taxation in support of the Trade Federation, so that they may remain unarmed and can be routed. Varuna doesn't like that idea though, not realising it would allow them to route the Trade Federation, as he feels it risks his re-election for king. And so Palpatine considers getting Plagueis' involvement to renegotiate the contract, but Varuna views Plagueis as outdated and will only make Naboo suffer more, which he probably would. The Trade Federation, however, stands to win the vote, as they get their armies to defend their cargo while increasing the shipping costs to compensate for paying out tax for that protection, for that funding. As for Valorum, due to all the conflicts and chaos he is causing, a vote for early end of term is likely, because Valorum, he has good intentions, but he just is incompetent in political cunning, and people just don't want to support him. So if the Grand Protectorate wins Chancellorship, I should put that in. If the Grand Protectorate wins Chancellorship, if the Grand Protectorate wins Chancellorship, then with the new alliance Naboo has with the Grand Protectorate, they'd have a friend in the Chancellorship to support them with breaking ties with the Trade Federation. I'm not entirely sure why Varuna is opposed to it. I assume he's opposed to the idea because by doing that, he's given himself a chance to root them. But I assume it's because, from a surface level, I didn't really realise it until reading this chapter. The way people will probably look at it is, well, you're stopping the Trade Federation from. You're just keeping the Trade Federation's profits as high as they can be, rather than them having to spend it, rather than them having to spend even more, or having to spend more from what they've lost on the taxation. So I assume that's why it would make him seem in favour of the Trade Federation. This is why it feels a bit complicated. To me, it just doesn't make sense why Varuna is why Palpatine's encouraging Varuna to vote against taxation, to seem in favour of the Trade Federation. To me, it just doesn't make much sense. But then that is politics, isn't it? So it's just at times decisions are made that just don't make any sense at all. Anyway, we cut away from that, and Valorum considers Palpatine's offer and decides, okay, we'll go for that. But if it turns out Palpatine is lying to him to deceive him, then he's not going to tolerate that. But anyway, we cut over to Sujan with Plagueis, and we get a bit of, and we don't really get anything of significance with Plagueis aside from what he's been up to. We know he's been setting his focus on mastering the Force. Mastering the Force and midichlorian manipulation, which he's really become strong with that ability. At the start of the book, he could only perceive what midichlorians could do. Now he has a lot of mastery over controlling them. But we get to see how he was able to influence his midichlorians to start healing himself and healing his body, and that he's almost made a full recovery from the malady and the assassins. And it wouldn't surprise me if Plagueis survived until for longer. If he would out heal the need for the transpirator, depending on how much can be healed without having to risk death by having that uninstalled, I assume. But anyway, we also get to see that Plagueis and Palpatine, this shift that they've been talking about for the past 2 chapters, was caused by them. They've shifted the Force into favouring the dark side through a ritual, and that would kind of explain why things aren't really going well for Valorum. It's making way for the Sith. But we also get to see when they did that, they also decided it was time for Venomous to be allowed to die. After all the experimentation he had been put through, and Plagueis uses manipulation of midichlorians to kill him, bring him back to life and kill him, bring him back to life and kill him, and bring him back to life and kill him, and did it over and over and over again until his organs just couldn't take it anymore, and he finally allowed him to die. It is a pity for Venomous. He was clearly capable in himself. He was a clearly capable Sith. He definitely wasn't as strong as Plagueis, but and we don't really know enough about his cunning to know how he would have done the Sith plan. But he was clearly capable. He definitely was, and it's a shame that he was just reduced to a lab rat, unfortunately. But Plagueis wasn't entirely satisfied with being able to control death. It wasn't the equivalent of being able to make life. And so Plagueis tried and tried to create life 8 years prior to this chapter. And it came to no avail. But as we know, well, at least as I know, the Force resisted his efforts, and he was putting such a great amount of force on. He was putting such a great amount of power into trying to do it. He ended up getting the Force to react to create Anakin, the Chosen One. But Plagueis doesn't know that yet, and it's not clarified in the book yet. But I know it because of lore that I've been aware of in the book for years at this point. But we get to see that. We also get to see how the that shift that Plagueis was trying to make in the Force was actually dangerous for Palpatine and Plagueis to enact. Yes, the two of them did do it. I've seen people say only Plagueis did it, but no, Plagueis and Palpatine did it together. Plagueis did try to create life on his own, not Sidious had no part in that. So they are two different things. I think most people think they're one thing. No, they're two separate things. But we get to see how, if the Force resisted them trying to shift the Force into the favour of the dark side, they may have killed the two of them. But they were able to assert their authority on the Force, as the Sith do. They make the Force its their servants, and I think this is the thing about. I think this is something you should be aware if you ever decide to read Plagueis. Have a good memory. You need to have a good memory when going into Plagueis, because if you don't, you're going to be struggling to keep up, because there is so much stuff that is referred to that is from earlier in the book. So you need to have a good memory when going through Plagueis. I'll make that clear for you if any of you have intentions. Have a good memory, and also be able to take notes for whenever you're just completely puzzled by what's going on. But anyway, then we cut to what Maul had seen during. We cut to Maul telling Palpatine what he'd seen when the Yin'Kori attacked the Jedi. I don't know why Jedi's left my mind for a moment. But hold on, I think maybe some things to Plagueis. Sorry, I forgot to add that Plagueis didn't actually mention to Sidious that he had tried to create life, and he was actually worried that the Force was going to strike back. He was aware that the Force would try to strike back and bring the light back into favour, and like how when an eclipse happens, the light is on the backside of what's causing that darkness, and that when it comes, that's when the light strikes in, and when that darkness has, of course, elapsed, that's when the light strikes in, once that darkness has had its effect. But anyway, Maul is recounting, is telling Sidious of what he saw when the Yin'Kori attacked the Jedi, and how the Jedi had outwitted them. And he said he may have respected the Jedi for their cunning in defeating the Yin'Kori, if the Yin'Kori were a competent force. And he says, if I had been leading them, I would have been able to. And he starts to talk about if I had been leading them, and Palpatine interrupts him and says, and kill the Jedi Knights, the Jedi Padawans and the younglings. And you just got Palpatine there thinking, oh, Plagueis was right, I've made him think he's more skilled than he is. Which is a bit of a funny thing. Again, this is what I always find, the thing I always find funny about Palpatine is the thought of him doing anything that's remotely normal. Because he's so evil and abnormal that it just always comes across as almost like a joke whenever he has emotions or does stuff that is normal. Amazon. But anyway, Palpatine he gives a bit of a lecture to Maul, saying that he didn't train him to only just to sacrifice himself, and that he gave him the title of Darth not because. Hold on, I need to get the book up here. So here we go. He tells Maul that he was formidable, but he didn't train him just for him to sacrifice himself. And when he gave him the title of Darth, it was a reward. He said it wasn't a reward for having survived dangerous missions, starvation and assassin droids, but for his obedience and loyalty to the Sith and the dark side and the Jedi. Not the Jedi, the Jedi, Plagueis and Palpatine. And he says that there is no doubt that you'll have many chances to demonstrate his superior skill to the Jedi, but bringing down the Order is not his concern. And despite it's not his order, and he's despite of his hatred. And Maul gives a really confusing line if you're not thinking properly, and it says, "Master, as long as those who derive the joy and satisfaction, I would." And it's that make Master, as long as those who derive the joy and satisfaction, I would. I understood it for a moment, and I've completely forgotten the understanding of that line. It's a really confusing one. This is a problem with James Luceno's writing at times. He forgoes typical formatting, and he kind of stylises formatting, which at times really makes certain bits of the book confusing, and this is an example of his stylised formatting. It just doesn't work. It makes it too complicated, in my opinion. It just doesn't. It's because it just doesn't make sense. You need to at least have, in my opinion, have at least some sense of make it cohesive. But from what I'm gathering and what I'm trying to remember, it's as long as he has the ability to kill some Jedi, so he can give himself that satisfaction. That's what I remember thinking. I think, and Sidious tells him that they'll see, but for now, then you have matters to attend to. And we see that Palpatine is starting a partnership with the Trade Federation, specifically Newt Gunray, having, of course, gifted him that bird. And I am curious to see why they're doing that. I have not watched The Phantom Menace in literal years, so through going this part of the book, I have actually felt like I've been missing something, and I think it's because I think it's because I haven't watched or paid attention to The Phantom Menace in years. Because there's a different. Because when you're reading a book, you're more attentive, aren't you? Whereas when you're watching something, you're less attentive. You're not really trying to search up the words that you don't understand it, just to let it go over your head and you enjoy the story. Whereas with a book, you're more. It sort of makes more of your focus, and you're trying to figure everything out. But anyway, I am going to be interested to see how they're going to try and manoeuvre the Trade Federation. I think from what I remember of what was mentioned in the book earlier, they're going to be they're going to be having the Trade Federation pretty much. But they're going to pretty much have the Trade Federation try to fund those worlds to rise up the Separatist Alliance, and fund so they can fund them and do all that shipping and stuff. From what I remember, but of course, I'm going to be interested to see what goes on. Again, I feel like I'm missing something by not watching The Phantom Menace, but I do have intentions to actually go and rewatch at least the prequels once I finish this book. So perhaps it will all just saying click for me. So yeah. Thank you all for watching. There's so much to keep track of in Plagueis, there really is. You need to remember a lot of stuff, you need to keep track of a lot of stuff, and reading multiple chapters a day is probably not helping with that, but oh well. Thank you all for watching, and goodbye.